A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good evening all and Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. My name is Amir Suleiman. I will act as the chair for this evening's event. Thank you very much indeed for attending this event this evening and making your way down to the Queen Elizabeth Centre, Queen Elizabeth II Centre in the heart of Westminster here. Thank you to our audience as well, watching live on British Muslim TV and those watching through the Community Exchange Hub live streams. You all are very welcome indeed. And also thanks to our gathered panel who sit before you this evening. We're very pleased to have with us Lord Wajid Khan, representing the Labour Party. We have Hina Bokhari, member of the London Assembly for the Liberal Democrats. Sharmen Rahman, parliamentary candidate for Leicester South for the Green Party. And Rahman, parliamentary candidate for Tottenham for the Conservative Party. So before we begin, I want to quickly mention this event's organisers from the Community Exchange Hub. So the Community Exchange Hub connects people with politics and the issues that affect the communities in which they live. It is a brand new community-focused initiative aimed at connecting British Muslim communities with candidates standing in this year's general election through a series of cross-party hustings in constituencies throughout the country, culminating today in this debate. So tonight's event, as I say, is the culmination of an extremely busy period for the Community Exchange Hub. In the last 10 days, we've been up and down the country delivering local hustings events. We've been in Peterborough, Luton South, Dewsbury and Batley, and Feltham and Heston just last night, creating the chance for voters to exchange ideas with those seeking election, providing an opportunity for people to engage on the issues that are most important to them and connecting politicians with voters in a safe and local space. So thank you to everyone who's participated so far. It has been an amazing couple of weeks. And tonight we'll be doing things slightly differently to a traditional hustings. Instead of local candidates debating local issues, we'll be discussing the big topics shaping voting intentions ahead of the general election day on Thursday. And to help us frame that, I'll shortly be announcing the results of a specially commissioned Community Exchange Hub poll of 1,500 British Muslim voters that has just concluded. We'll then move on to our audience question time, where I'll be posing the questions that our gathered audience submitted on their way into tonight's event. And thank you very much if you have submitted a question. After each candidate has, concisely, responded to the question, I will open it up to the audience for supplementary questions, time permitting, and make sure that, please, if you do ask a question, that it is on the same topic, just for the interests of time. It's an interactive format and all contributions are important, and we want to hear from everyone that would like to contribute. So in order to do that, I must ask that audience members please do keep your questions short, and candidates please keep your responses concise. Above all, I will intervene if I believe I need to in the interests of time. We do not welcome shouting or protest. We hope and expect calm, polite and sincere contributions from all, please. And if there's a point you agree with that one of our representatives shares with you, feel free to give them a round of applause. Let's show appreciation as well. I got a round of applause just for housekeeping. So you seem like a very generous audience. So let's make the most of this important conversation. So first, before I introduce your candidates to you formally, your representatives, forgive me, I'm pleased to announce the findings of the specially commissioned Community Exchange Hub poll of 1,500 British Muslim voters. Commissioned by the Community Exchange Hub, More in Common polled a representative sample of 1,500 Muslims in Britain online between the 20th of June and the 1st of July 2024. Now, this sample was weighted to make it representative by age and sex, ethnicity, region, country of birth and education. And More in Common is a member of the British Polling Council and abides by its rules. Our poll has found that the key priorities that British Muslim voters have for any incoming government are to see action on the NHS, economy, housing and immigration. 68% of those that we polled ranked action on the NHS as their immediate priority for any incoming government. with the economy ranking as the highest single concern, with 33% of respondents saying it was the one issue they were most concerned about. So with less than 1 week out from the general election, literally a couple of days, a majority of Muslim voters, 57%, plan to back Labour at the election, while just over a fifth will back either the Green Party or another party or independent candidate. That's 12%. The research finds that British Muslim communities have been engaged extensively by candidates and parties compared to the national average, with over a third of those polled, that's 34%, having had their door knocked by a political campaigner ahead of the election, with only 17% of the wider UK public having been engaged. Conleth Burns, Associate Director at More in Common, who is here with us tonight, I hope. Are they in the room? No, I don't think they are. Okay. Has said that this research confirms that the concerns Muslim communities have in this election match closely with those of the wider electorate, with the NHS and the economy front of mind, and domestic issues taking priority over international issues for many Muslim voters. Muslim voters are also more than twice as likely to have had their door knocked by a political canvasser in the last weeks of the campaigning, reflecting the extent to which political parties have sought to engage Muslim voters ahead of the election. And despite clear concerns over their stance on Gaza, this polling shows support for Labour remains resilient with Muslim voters ahead of Thursday's vote. That was a quote from Conleth Burns, a reminder, Associate Director at More in Common. Now, before we start our audience question time segment, let's start with some questions from me. It's the host's prerogative, I think. I'm very privileged to be able to have it. First up, we'll start with Lord Wajid Khan, representing the Labour Party. Lord Khan, thank you very much for joining us. Given that trust in politics is low, what can the Labour Party do to rebuild trust?
Bismillahir Rahman Rahim. First of all, thank you, Ahmed, brother, for chairing, and great to meet yourself, Sharmen, Hina, and Atiq, and thank you, Community Exchange Hub, and I absolutely appreciate everyone taking their time out here for this hustings. And I've travelled 3.5 hours, 224 miles, just to see you guys today. Labour Party has, in reality, looking at the polls, I've always appreciated the long-standing support from our parents and grandparents over the years. And even now, according to that poll, the support is resilient. And there are challenges. There is a lot of trust issues about politics generally. There's a lot of apathy at the moment. And if you look at my life, I've worked as a local councillor for 16 years, served as a mayor, served in the International Parliament, in the European Parliament, now in the House of Lords as a shadow front bench in housing and levelling up and communities department. So for me, the most important point is making sure that people feel politics resonates with them, is relevant for them, and that being involved in politics, voting, comes with a change, a difference in their lives, in their livelihoods. And the points you talked about, economy and NHS, I'm not surprised, Ahmed, because if you look at the state of the economy, if you look at the NHS, if my mum was in hospital yesterday, she had to wait hours and hours and hours to be seen at hospital. And that is not just the example of my family, it's many examples. We can't even get an appointment. And that is why we need to make sure that the system is fixed, it's broken. You know, if you ask the question, and I finish off on this very point, after 14 years of the Conservative government, am I and my family better off? And the answer, you know, is a big fat no. And that's why I say, in 36 hours' time, is an opportunity for all the brothers and sisters in the room and all people watching, for them and their families to choose a better future, a future which involves better public services, better economy, clean energy, tougher law and crime and issues that affect our communities, but overall a future for our children. And that's why it's really important. I think this is one of the most important elections of our generation. So we need to make sure over the next 36 hours we convince people that their voting at the ballot box brings about that change.
Thank you, Lord Khan. Thank you very much. Just to come back on the point of the question, how will you convince the electorate that Labour will rebuild trust in politics? Can you just be concise on that in 30 seconds?
Yeah, because we want to take power to give back power. We need to ensure that people are at the very bottom layer of the system, that it's a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. We look at devolution and ensure that decision-making is more concise and devolved power is given and to local communities to ensure that they can make difference in their communities. And the way you do that is by engaging, listening, and transferring power, like you see with the mayoral systems in Greater Manchester, like the bus examples, and look in West Yorkshire. So overall, centralised system working in Whitehall doesn't always reflect the whole country, and that's what we need to change.
Thank you very much, Lord Khan. Next up, Hina Bokhari, member of the London Assembly for the Liberal Democrats. Hina, if I can ask you, where does the Liberal Democrats put themselves and position themselves in the mind of the electorate, do you feel? Sorry, forgive me.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation today. The Liberal Democrats are putting themselves very firmly in place in the electorate to make sure that that trust is rebuilt. And we know that the most important thing is to listen. And what we have done is listen. Every person that we've talked to has influenced the manifesto that we have, which is based on on very clear outcomes, which is to make sure that we fix the NHS. That's actually our number one area. Social care is incredibly important, and throughout our manifesto, we also want to make sure that we are focusing on the cost of living, housing, the environment, education. So our party is firmly fixed at making sure that we are fixing the problems and the issues that our residents are telling us. And also, they are telling us that they are disappointed in politics and politicians. They are telling us that they have lost trust and that they want to see a better style of politics, which is why we are pushing for reform of our political system to make sure that every voice is heard. We have young people who don't want to vote anymore, who are disillusioned by politics. And by reforming the system, making sure that every voice and every vote matters, this is the essential way forward for us. Party politics is broken, and we need to make sure that we put politics last. It has to be people first, always people first, because real change is coming. This election is going to be historic. This election is going to make real change for many, many people. And we've seen it. We've seen it in tactical websites that are coming up, independent and small parties have started to grow. And that's because people are now saying, when they are voting, does this party or this candidate really, truly speak for me? And that's what the Liberal Democrats are doing. We are listening. We will make that change. And if we are in opposition, and let's see what happens when it comes to the final polls, and in a good position for opposition, we will make sure that the Labour government really does stand for the people, because right now I'm disappointed in their manifesto and disappointed in their position.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your response. Next, let's talk to Sharmen Rahman, parliamentary candidate for Leicester South for the Green Party. Sharmen, given it's unlikely that you'll be in government or opposition, why should people vote Green?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Amir. So after 14 years of austerity, a cost of living crisis, and a failing stance on Gaza by the major political parties, the communities that I represent in Leicester South, they're hurting. They're hurting economically, they're hurting socially, they're hurting emotionally because of some of the scenes that they've seen coming out of Palestine. Our communities are hurting because there's been a failure of government to see our communities as people that deserve investment, and a failure of the opposition to see our communities as somebody worth advocating for. The Green Party has positioned itself specifically to speak truth to power. We're being honest about what's required to fix our public services. We're being honest about what's required to fix the situation internationally. We're being honest about what's required to fix our economy, to fix the climate, to fix our social safety nets. And the reality is we have to be honest about taxation. And what we've been doing over the last few weeks is making the case for a fairer tax system that will allow us to invest in all of our public services, to invest in our communities, to invest in education. And I think that's where the Green Party has really led the way, being honest about what's required to fix this country, the damage that's been done by the Conservatives and the damage that's been done by the failure of responsibility by the Labour Party.
Thank you very much, Sharmen Rahman, parliamentary candidate for the Green Party. And last but not least, Atiq Rahman, parliamentary candidate for Tottenham, for the Conservative Party. Atiq, why should the electorate give the Tories another 5 years? 14 years is a long time to get things done.
Thank you, Amir. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening to everyone. I often listen to opposition members and leaders talk about 14 years, 14 years. Yes, we have had a Conservative government for 14 years. The first 5 years of this was a coalition government when the Labour Party had left the economy in a complete state of collapse. So the first 5 years were about remedying this economy. But since 2010, we have made great strides. Everybody talks about austerity. Austerity ended in 2015. There's been more investment in the NHS, more investment in our public services, and we then had to deal with Brexit, post-Brexit. That took up most of the time. And 2019, post-2019, we had the COVID pandemic to deal with, but we have got things done. Rishi Sunak has come in. It's been 18 months, and he told the country when he came in that his first priority was to stabilise the economy. We have now stabilised the economy. We are the fastest growing economy in the G7. Inflation has fallen, and even today we've read the cost of basic goods, coffee, sugar, have now fallen. His plan is working. Has it been perfect? No. But if you look at the opposition have talked the talk, but cannot come up with a viable plan. Sharmen talks about the Green Party and the investment. Agreed, we need great public services. But the investment, what is the amount? What needs to change? There is no plan. Rishi Sunak has talked about pharmacy first. He's talked about the new diagnostic centres. He's talked about recruiting more doctors, more nurses, more police officers. These are practical, quantifiable steps that the public can have assurance because they can be delivered.
Thank you very much, Atiq Rahman. Appreciate your response. Okay, let's go to our first question that's been pre-submitted from our audience. No name on this one, but it's addressed to Lord Khan initially, and then we'll get responses from our other representatives. Lord Khan, what is Labour going to do about the cost of living crisis, which particularly affects marginalised communities, for example, housing, jobs and schooling?
Thank you very much for that question. And first of all, let me just say it's an absolute disgrace that in this day and age that we've got 2,000 plus food banks. That is a state of where the government has left us. So of course, we need to make sure that we need to grow the economy. We need to create wealth. That's why we are having a real clear industrial strategy. Because at the moment, nothing's working. We had this disastrous trustonomics, the Project Trust, who was beaten by lettuce. That's how competent that leadership was. And which left mortgages sky high, and as you said, a cost of living. People are struggling to make ends meet. People are choosing to heat their house or eat. That is 2024. This shouldn't be the case. Our plan is to ensure that we're going to develop a clear child poverty strategy. We've done it before. We was the party that brought in short start centres. We were the party that has delivered a minimum wage, and we have delivered economically when we came into power in 1997. We have the same spirit, the same focus to ensure that our policies growing the economy and ensuring a pro-business approach, more jobs, wealth creation, that we absolutely grow as a country. Because at this moment in time, people are really struggling to make ends meet, and that is the state of the government of which has left this country in the state.
Lord Khan, thank you very much indeed. Let's go for a response from Atiq Rahman, please, on Lord Khan's comments.
Well, the first thing is mortgage rates. Interest rates are set by the Bank of England, not the government. And the Bank of England had set those interest rates 17 hikes when they suddenly realised the 400 billion was printed during the COVID pandemic, which rightly was given to everyone who needed a job. We needed people to keep their jobs, be able to feed themselves, house themselves. So it was right to spend the money. Insofar as the economy is concerned, as I just mentioned in my opening remarks, the economy is back up and running. Inflation is down.
But trust.
Well, the Liz Truss, her budget never came into effect. And if you look at what the actual statistics say, post Liz Truss, the economy actually grew. So it wasn't a Liz Trussonomics which caused a downturn whatsoever. The economy actually grew. But how do we deal with the cost of living? And I think, I don't want to be partly political about this, because it is something that there are people in this country who are really suffering, and we have to acknowledge that. And the best way we see in tackling that is to give people the opportunities, creating more jobs, particularly for the youth. So 100,000 more apprenticeships. We're reducing the stamp duty for first-time buyers. Okay. And it's all about capturing the aspiration of the people of this country to make a better life for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we ask Hina, please, for your thoughts on this topic, the cost of living?
I think the cost of living is the one of the top topics that we are having to talk to our residents about all the time, and specifically within the Muslim community. I think what I'm really disappointed in is that we are not pushing to scrap the cap. A benefit tax for families with more than 2 children. This is not fair, and that is a real problem for the Labour Party. I think that they now need to make a real movement here. There are families that are going through an incredibly difficult time right now, and until we scrap that cap, they will continue to suffer. And those families are working hard. Some of them have got 2 jobs. Both parents are working. Their children deserve better. There are children in poverty in our country right now because of things like this cap. Now, there are also things that our residents are telling us about, which is particularly on social care and the cost of social care. This is a massive issue. We want to make sure that there is free personal care. That has to happen because of the amount of people that are really suffering now because of the cuts to our NHS. We want to make sure that care workers have a minimum wage of £2, and we're going to be paying for all of this. It's all fully costed, all of these policies, through reforming the capital gains tax and also reversing the Conservative tax cuts to big banks, which should actually raise £4 billion a year. So we have a plan.
Okay, I'll just pick up on a couple of points there. In your manifesto, you say you'd spend another 19.7 billion on investments, such as building, as you mentioned, 150,000 new social homes a year. This money is not included in your costing, however, suggesting that it will be funded by extra borrowing.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to be clear on that
Yeah.
point. Thank you very much, Hina, for your response. And last but not least, Sharmen, please, for the Green Party, your views on the cost of living.
Well, the cost of living crisis in my constituency of Leicester South is number 1 on the range of issues that come up on the doorstep. Every time we go door knocking, it's a different story about how people are choosing between heating and eating, as Lord Khan mentioned, but about just basic trying to get by. And the reality is the Conservative government have overseen a period by which this is the first generation that's going to see their living standards fall. Young people are seeing less and less opportunity, and their lives becoming less open to prosperity and opportunities. But at the same time, even in this discourse, aside from Hina, we've not heard any policies from either of the Conservative or Labour candidates here. We need more than just jibes about Liz Truss and the lettuce. We need actual policies to make people better off. And it is a shame that the coming government, the Labour government, is keeping the 2-child benefit cap, but happy to keep the removal of the banker's bonus cap. And
So could you
for
focus
me,
on your policies?
That's cool.
yeah, so we would be removing the two-child benefit cap, which the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has published a study that shows that's the quickest and easiest way to remove children from deep poverty. 40% of my constituency, the children in my constituency, are in poverty right now. And this is a different kind of poverty. This is poverty even though their parents are working. So this is not out of work poverty. This is poverty despite their parents working 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 jobs. It's unacceptable. And it's unacceptable to see the failure from the main 2 parties. And I'm glad that the Green Party are actually proposing real interventionist policies like a basic minimum wage of £15 per hour, like the removal of the two-child policy cap, child benefit cap. We need policies. We don't need jibes from one party to another.
And wealth tax as well, advocating wealth tax to support your fiscal plans.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how we would cost it. Unlike what Atik said, we do actually have a plan, a costed plan
Okay.
for all of these issues.
I don't think I said it was uncosted. I just said you talk the talk,
You
but
said we
you
didn't
know,
have
walk the
plans.
walk.
We do have plans.
But that's likewise, we've had plans as well. I give you 2
They're just
policies.
not working very well, are they?
100,000 new apprenticeships.
Okay.
You agree that's good?
Let's
The new
move on.
Police officers.
In the interest of time, let's move on to a related topic, actually. How will Labour, Lord Khan, ensure that taxation is maintained at an appropriate and suitable level? You know, we've heard a lot in this campaign from Sir Keir Starmer about taxation. If you could just elaborate on the views of the Labour Party.
It's quite simple, Amir. We're not going to keep everything as it is, in the sense there's been no increase to personal income tax. There'll be no increase to national insurance contributions. There'll be no increase to VAT, and there'll be no increase to corporation tax. We are a pro-worker and pro-business party. That is all I've got to say on this issue.
Okay, Hina, your views on that, please.
I mean, I've already mentioned the capital gains tax, that we are going to try and close all the loopholes, and that will raise £5 billion a year. And
Sorry to cut you off. What are your thoughts initially on what Lord Khan said about Labour's taxation?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think it's all about caution for the Labour Party, and that's their approach, rather than doing anything that's actually going to make a progressive change. So it's all of the same, and pretty much what the Conservative Party are doing. So my reaction is it's just going to be more of the same and nothing changes.
Atik, your response, please, to Lord Khan and Hina's comments?
Well, you know, what Lord Khan said, he's right. Labour criticised a lot of these policies, and now they've accepted them. Not surprising to us. There's been U-turn after U-turn from the Labour Party. But I think we are quite clear where the Conservatives stand in terms of taxation. It is a plan that's been working. It's a plan that Rishi Sunak has been building up to. And we are going to be cutting national insurance contributions once again. What Labour are not telling you is what other taxes on a specific basis, as they put it, they will raise. And one of them has actually leaked today, which is they will reduce the reduce the threshold for stamp duty for first-time buyers to £300,000. Rishi Sunak has said we will increase that to £425,000. And the approach really is we want to incentivize people to actually go out there and build their fortunes, build their lives, and we want to be building the infrastructure to enable them to do this.
Okay, thank you very much. Atik and Sharmen, please, your thoughts.
I think the most instructive thing that Lord Khan just said is we're going to keep everything as it is. So if you want to keep everything as it is, that's your man.
Taxation,
But
taxation, not everything.
it's my time to speak.
Taxation, to be clear.
It's my turn to speak. We're not about that. We're about change, real hope. We don't just use change as a slogan. We actually mean it when it comes to the policies. So we're looking at we're looking at real instructive policies when it comes to housing, removing the no-fault eviction, introducing rent caps, so that people actually feel better off and feel more secure in their communities. I think when politicians use slogans like change, they actually have to back that up with policies. And when you say that actually you're going to be very, very safe in terms of keeping everything as it is, you're assuming the electorate is none the wiser, that they won't ask those questions. We're not going to keep everything as it is. We will be troublemakers in Parliament, holding the Labour government to account, pushing the Labour government on being more ambitious for our NHS, being more ambitious for those that are working hard, that are suffering suffering over the last 14 years of austerity, being more ambitious on our environment. And frankly, we need an intervention. When we look at Muslim communities, one of the components of us being Muslims is to look after the world that we're in. And so the environment is a really important part of that. And unfortunately, it hasn't figured very highly in the debate over the last few weeks, but it is an absolutely crucial part of that, because no planet, no jobs, no lives, nothing to save.
Thank you very much. Sharmen, appreciate that.
I mean, I've just misquoted there. Can I clarify that misquotation? I didn't say everything will stay as it is. I said the taxation will stay as it is, which is we're not going to increase the tax. That's a big difference from saying...
Without tax revenues, how do you implement changes and investment into the NHS and investment into our communities and investment into our public
That's another
services?
question. If your chair allows me to answer that, I said to you, we did an industrial strategy to grow our country. The country is in a mess at the moment. It's gone sideways as a result of what happened with our mortgage and cost of living crisis.
Wishful thinking,
No,
isn't
it isn't, because when
There's
you
no plan for growth.
there is a plan for growth. We're going to devise an industrial strategy. We're going to have a wealth fund, and we're going to bring a lot of FDI investment into our country, because at
No
this moment
numbers
in
and
time,
no figures,
internationally,
no certainty.
we are embarrassing the way the government has dealt with Brexit afterwards.
Okay,
and also our
Lord
reputation
Khan.
in the world has gone dire, because I was in the
Amir,
European Parliament.
I'd like to-
Lord
So
Khan, just
when
one
I was in the European Parliament when this
Lord Khan,
reputation went...
Lord Khan, 1 second.
You've got to clarify this. I didn't say what I said. And
Okay, let me try and help you, because I'll quote some of your manifesto here. The Labour manifesto promises 7.4 billion of tax rises, including a pledge to levy VAT on private school fees. One to tighten the taxation of non-DOMs, and one to widen the windfall tax on oil and gas companies. That pays for just 4.8 billion in new spending, which will pay for more teachers and nurses, as well as green investment. Did you want to elaborate on those points? The reason I'm asking you to focus on your manifesto, just for clarity.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting everybody know them points in particular. Look, that's why I've said to you, we can't just put tax and get our country back up and running again. We've got to attract investment, and this is what our country is great at. We have great universities, R&D, innovation and creativity, which all the world looks at and sees us as a brand UK. And what we've got to do is get out there across the world, and if you let me finish my last point, Amir, is get FDI into our country. And the way we do that is through a sensible industrial strategy where we are seen as a wonderful place to invest and grow. And once you invest and grow your economy, you grow the taxation, you grow the economy to get more taxes in, which we can invest into public services, because at this moment
Just
of time,
a final
they're
point
not fit for purpose.
Just a final point from Atiq, please. I think you wanted to just interject on
Yes.
that point. Just really briefly, please.
I mean, it's more a question to Amir when he talks about this industrial strategy and attracting foreign direct investment, the FDI. The UK is the premier country for foreign investment and has been for months. So it's not something new Labour's going to do. But let me ask you this. Does your strategy include introducing more PFI for the public NHS?
I think the
Let's
question's
not
for you.
introduce another
Question's
question.
for you, not for
please.
me.
Let's not-
There's
That's
a
you the
question for you.
question.
That's not ours. That's
He's
your
asking you the
policy.
question.
That's
Let's move on.
your policy.
Let's move on. I gave you the opportunity to come back on a point, but I wasn't expecting another question. But thank you very much. Okay, let's go to our next question. This is from Mariam Kareem, who is a student. And she writes, many Muslim voters are feeling disillusioned by and have lost their sense of belonging within the main political parties, especially due to their stance on issues such as Gaza. How will you work to rebuild trust and ensure the voices of Muslims and other minority groups are represented in your party's policy-making process? Atiq, can we start with you on this, please?
Yeah, sure. So I want to start by saying, reiterating what the UK government has said when it voted for the ceasefire, the United Nations ceasefire last month. And it did so because of the catastrophic loss of life in Gaza. And we backed that up by calling for a ceasefire, release the hostages. We need to take in a lot more humanitarian aid, and David Cameron has been leading the world on humanitarian aid into Gaza. With we've even had field hospitals to treat the injured. But how do we build trust with the public? And it's by electing people who represent, are from the same background, maybe share the same religion as you. And it's about having that dialogue. There are idealistic positions. There's a lot of rhetoric going on. But as Tony Blair once wrote, the burden of power brings you back to reality in what you can do, realistically, practically. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot more clear policy, discussions so that people are not swayed by a lot of what I quote unquote, a lot of the media speculation.
Okay, if I may come back on a point, which is rather close to home to me. My constituency is, where I live, is Peterborough. You know Paul Bristow, MP for Peterborough. He wrote a letter to Rishi Sunak calling for a ceasefire, and he lost his government job.
Yes, it is.
So when the public hear about that side of things, it doesn't instill much confidence and trust in the Muslim community.
That's true, but as I say, Paul Bristow did, call for a ceasefire at a time when the government wasn't convinced or there was a need for ceasefire. This was shortly after the 7th of October attacks, and they were taking the view that Israel had a right to defend itself and bring back its hostages. Since then, the position is, as I said, the word that the UK government used was there's a catastrophic loss of life in Gaza, and the position really is catastrophic, and now they've had to intervene.
Okay, thank you very much, Atiq. Lord Khan, before I come to you, I must remind what is at the forefront of a lot of people who I know, Muslims, Keir Starmer's comments on Israel's stance and his comments on food and water for Gaza and the Palestinians. I'm sure you recall the comments well. With that in mind, how would this trust be rebuilt, given what we've heard from Sir Keir Starmer?
First of all, I think Keir Starmer himself didn't agree with them comments. That's why you went out to clarify them comments. Obviously, that's why people clarify them comments. Second point is, of course, let's put everything in context. What's happening in Gaza, is absolutely, horrifying. Any loss of innocent life is deplorable, shocking, hurtful, and the international community has failed the people of Gaza over decades. Second point is, as a father of young children, it's been very difficult scenes that we get sent, the images that are coming out of Gaza. It's heartbreaking. Ultimately, we are in opposition, and in 36 hours, there's election, and people are there to put their vote in. But when they vote there, they must look at what's going to happen, what's the scenario. You're either going to get a Conservative government or a Labour government. That is the reality. With all due respect to my sisters on the panel, the government's going to be either red or blue. And if you look at blue, look at what the blue government has done over the 14 years on Palestine. What I'm trying to say to you, look at what it hasn't done on Palestine. What actually has it done? This didn't start 7th of October. Palestinian suffering, it has been happening over decades, and that's why if a Labour government comes in power, we will work with international partners, but really what is the fundamental cause of the problem is we haven't got a Palestinian state. That's why we will recognise a Palestinian state as part of a two-state solution. We want more aid into Gaza. We want to uphold international law, respect ICC, ICJ, because ultimately a Palestinian state is the inalienable right of the Palestinian people. No other country should veto that.
Okay, Lord Khan, just a supplementary question. Forgive me, but just to get clarity, everything you've just said there in the last half of your response, if Sir Keir Starmer, your party leader, doesn't agree with that, how will that sit with you?
Well, that's in our manifesto. So the whole idea of government is you deliver on your manifesto. That is in our manifesto, to recognise Palestine alongside Israel as part of a two-state solution, as a contribution to the peace process, not as an outcome to the peace process, working with international partners, because ultimately what we want to see is Palestinian people to be given their dignity and their right, with the United Nations has promised them, and that's why I said the international community collectively and continuous governments have failed them, for them to live in peace and prosperity. We take it for granted when we put our children to sleep at night in warm beds, when we realise over there are people dying every day. If it's not for the war, and if it's not for missiles, it's for people starving, and that is unacceptable. That's why we need aid in there as fast as can, and we call for immediate ceasefire for the fighting to stop.
So, Lord Khan, there's what's written in the manifesto, and then there are your leader's comments, and they are both very different.
Which comments?
I refer to the previous comments I mentioned.
LBC.
Sorry?
Which comments, Ahmed?
About food and water being withheld.
Then he clarified them comments. It's on record that he came back and said, we will work, everything what happens should be happening within the context of international law. And then further, we've actually said we'll respect ICC and ICJ judgments. We're an internationalist party, and he clarified his comments to say that we will work, we want everything to, international law should prevail at every conflict across the world. International law is the most important point.
Thank you, Lord Khan, for elaborating. Hina, please.
I think the most interesting thing is that Keir Starmer is constantly clarifying himself. Every time he makes a statement, he has to clarify himself and what he actually meant. He has to make sure that you understand what he means, because actually, this is the problem, isn't it? This is why so many people in the Muslim community have lost trust, particularly in the Labour Party. He's having to clarify points about the Bangladeshi community recently.
That's a separate topic. We won't get onto that just yet.
Yeah, but this is the point. Our party, the Liberal Democrats, have a leader, Ed Davey, who was the very first person, actually, who supported the ICJ and the ICC statements and the warrants for arrest. We haven't heard much from the Tories on that particular topic. He was also the only leader that I know of that's actually visited Palestine since October and gone to the West Bank. The only leader to have done that. And we were the first party to call for a bilateral ceasefire.
No, that's not correct.
It
The
is
Greens
absolutely
called for a ceasefire
100%
on the 9th
correct.
of October.
And you can look
I
it
know,
up.
because my
You
son
can
was
all look
born
it
on
up.
the 8th and the statement went out
Please
on
look
the
it up.
9th.
We'll let you come back on that.
Let's debate that later. But the most important thing is that the ceasefire has to be immediate, it has to be now. We've been calling for this. And the problem has been is that our media have not focused on this. I'm going to be blunt here. Our media does shift away from this when we want to be talking about this issue. And every time I'm door knocking, the first thing that people talk to me after talking about cost of living, etc., is, what's your stance on Gaza? I think this is a disappointment that they're not hearing enough from us, the politicians, on our position on this.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, we must be briefer than we have been.
Can I just
1 second. Let's give a chance to Sharmen to come back, please.
So my son was born on the 8th of October, and when I sit here and hear Atiq talk about Conservatives calling for a ceasefire last month, and then Lord Khan talking about a ceasefire that they've supported in the last couple of months, and then Lib Dems talking about a ceasefire that took them several months to come to.
No, it did not. That's an absolute lie.
We called for
Absolute
a ceasefire.
lie.
We called for a ceasefire on the 9th of October. My son was born on the 8th of October, and I saw in that entire span of time, as my son's hands and his little feet have grown, I've also seen these little hands and little feet in the rubble. It shouldn't take a politician to call that out. It should take anyone with a basic level of humanity to say that this was wrong. And it is an absolute failure of not being a politician, but a failure of humanity to not call this out at the very beginning. And I'm proud to stand for a party that has called this out from the very beginning, a party that has also backed South Africa's case at the ICJ, and also to talk about war crimes. The reality is there are crimes here that have been perpetrated against humanity, and neither of the major parties have talked soon enough about the fact that we need to hold any country, but Israel in this specific instance, to account when they have violated international law.
Sharmen, thank you. Thank you very much. Given the topic that we're currently on, are there any questions from the audience? We can take one question. We have time to squeeze in. Anyone like to ask a question to the panel? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Forgive me.
Sorry, I just have some comment. First of all, about...
It'd be a question rather than a comment,
Yes.
please. Thank you.
The question is, none of the program or the manifesto will work with the UK because the growth number is under 1%. So we can't depend on the national debt is 99.8% from national GDP, which is too big. So if you want to borrow, we need at least 2%.
We're on the topic of Gaza at the moment.
In the Gaza.
That's why I needed your question
in
on
Gaza.
this topic.
Okay, in Gaza. Yes, Keir Starmer said he will recognize a Palestinian state. But the dilemma is, he said, with consultation with international partner. Israel is one of the international partner. If she said no for Palestinian state, it should be no. So we need,
I need to push you for the
we need
question.
unilateral recognize of the Palestinian state. This is the issue. Thanks.
What's the question?
The question, can he declare or recognize the Palestinian state with unilateral action, not with the international partner?
Well, I can answer that.
Okay, please, Lord Khan first.
Brother, first of all, thank you very much for your question. And let me just reiterate that, of course, our lines are clear. We will recognize a Palestinian state as part of the two-state solution. Why you say international partners? Because we want this solution to be sustainable. If we don't want Palestine, again, 5 years later, bombed again, 5 years later bombed again. In order for it to be sustainable, you need to work with the Saudis, Qataris, Jordanians, and the Egyptians. They are part of the whole region. Of course, any international partners in order to deliver peace, because like we said before, as UK, if we are privileged to serve in government, Palestine, as I said before, we want to recognize Palestine as part of a two-state solution, but also we want to deliver on that recognition. We don't want it to be a recognition in symbolic nature and do nothing about it. That's why the international partners come in, because we need the global community to get its act together and make sure that them people can live their life in dignity and have a future and prosperity like other countries. And we have said that it is not in the gift of a neighbor to veto that. It's an inalienable right for the Palestinians.
Thank you, Lord Khan. Thank you, sir.
We can't veto.
Thank you very much.
That's what we said.
Just in the interest of time, we must move on. I really appreciate your question. Thank you very much. Sharmen, would you like to come back on this?
Yeah, just because Lord Khan's talking about Labour backing a Palestinian state, but in the recent last few days, your leader has announced that he's going to delay it in order to not jeopardise his relationship with the United States. So it's in the Independent in the headlines, so maybe you want to check that. I think there's been across-the-board failure when it comes to this issue, and it's about consistency. When we have held the moral stance when it comes to Russia's aggression on Ukraine, I think it was very clear to the British public that we should have held a similarly principled stance when it came to the Palestinians. And the British public have seen in clear light, night and day, the absolute difference in approach, the slowness to act, the slowness to condemn. And that is something that amongst British Muslim communities is not something that's going to be forgotten very easily. And frankly, it's unforgivable.
Thank you very much, Sharmen. We're going to take another question on this. The lady in the front here, we'll just get a mic to you. Thank you.
I think it's interesting that Labour is so proud of their support of a two-state solution within Israel and Palestine. So I want to ask, what is the policy imperative for choosing a two-state solution instead of a one-state democratic secular government? I'm from South Africa, so we went through something similar, and the result was not a two-state solution.
Thank you very much for your question. Atiq, would you like to start?
Well, David Cameron has talked about a two-state solution. That's what the Oslo Accords talk about. There are discussions about a single secular parcel of land for both people, but I think that is being taken off the table for the time being because it's simply not workable. And, one thing I agree with Lord Khan on is we do need international recognition for a state of Palestine. It is not simply in our gift to recognize unilaterally a state of Palestine because it's not sustainable. You will have issues surrounding what are the borders of Palestine, the governance of Palestine, and so forth. And therefore, it's not sustainable. It has to be done in coordination with international parties. And I'm pleased to say David Cameron has been leading the charge around the world talking about a two-state solution as part and parcel of the ceasefire, the release of the hostages, humanitarian aid, and a meaningful progress to a two-state solution. But it's not something, as some parties would like you to believe, something which can be done overnight. And unfortunately, that is the reality of it. Should we move faster? Can we move faster? These are questions which the new government, whether it's Labour or the Conservatives, will have to answer. And, I'd like to thank everyone who has raised their voice from the British Muslim community because it has been heard loud and clear, and it is now going to have to be actioned quite promptly by the new government.
Thank you very much. Hina, please.
There's only one Palestinian MP in Parliament, and that's the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament of Oxford, Layla Moran. She's a Christian Palestinian. Her family are in Gaza and have been for generations. And they are family, this family in particular had been there before Israel. They lived in harmony with Jews, Christians, Muslims, happily living together. And that is a way forward that I think many people would love to see again. But it's going to take, and what you've said, South Africa as an example, a lot of conciliation, lots of talking, lots of forgiveness. And that's not going to be easy. That's going to be the challenge, which is why we are supporting a two-state solution. And Layla Moran has every single year been putting forward an act in Parliament to push for that state for Palestine, every single year. Now, I would love it to have a time where all of those communities can work together and perhaps have a more secular approach, as you say, but I don't think that's going to happen now. A two-state solution is the only way forward. I think it's really important that all faiths feel valued and heard and listened to and have a place in the politics that are, in those states. And it would just be too much of a challenge, I think, to go forward for a one-state solution.
Hina, thank you very much.
I haven't responded.
Can we let the other candidates respond first, just in fairness? Okay, thank you. Lord Khan?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your question. I think I expect what works for one country might be different for another country, but ultimately what we base our focus on is what the Palestinian people want and what the Palestinian authorities want. Every discussion we've had and we have a regular discussion. I've met the Palestinian ambassador, great man, Dr. Hussam Zomlot, and as others have met, and even Keir Starmer has had a meeting with them, as well as our leadership. So from all our discussions with them, the Palestinian authorities and people have talked about wanting a two-state solution. If there's overwhelming support for a one-state solution, that can be discussed. But we are in contact regularly, speaking to the Palestinian authorities on behalf of the Palestinian people, and that's where we say our manifesto, the part where we said a Palestinian state as a contribution to a peace process, not the outcome, is a big thing, because we're not waiting for the end of the discussions. We're saying that's a given.
Okay, Lord Khan, thank you. And we have about 10 minutes, if that, left. Sharmen, if you could briefly respond to this point, please.
Yeah, I don't think it's for the international community to tell Palestinians and Israelis what the peaceful solution for them looks like. I think it's for them to decide what a long-term, durable, peaceful solution looks like. And I think especially when the international community has failed so miserably, the Palestinian people, but also the Israeli people, the decision really should be for those people to decide what a peaceful, Palestinians to decide what a peaceful and long-lasting peace looks like. But I just wanted to come back on one point about Keir Starmer's comments on LBC Radio. I think a lot of people focus on that show, but a lot of people don't realize that he was actually on Radio 4 earlier on that morning. And he made those same comments on Radio 4 with Nick Robinson. So he stated them twice. And then Shadow Cabinet member Emily Thornberry went on to Newsnight and doubled down on that messaging. So I think this excuse of him having misspoken, frankly, doesn't register with most people that have got a brain. And people realize that what he said was what he meant. And instead of trying to explain away, he should apologize.
Thank you very much, Sharmen, for your contribution. Next question from Lubna. Thank you for your question submitted as you walked in. We'll start with Atik on this because you're currently in government. How will you put ethics and integrity back into the heart of politics? And frankly speaking, if I may, the track record of the Conservatives in recent years has not been too strong on this.
Yes, well, thank you for the question, Lubna. It's not going to... Look, I think elections are very important in order to have new representatives in Parliament. To be frank, our Parliament has not really been working. It's not just the Conservatives, from the opposition as well. since 2017, since, post the Brexit vote, Brexit negotiations, Brexit arguments has just brought the worst out of our parliament. And I'd hope that the 2019 general election, with Boris Johnson having a big majority, would bring back some, professionalism into parliament. Unfortunately, during the COVID pandemic, we've seen so much party political backtacking, and it's just brought the worst out of that parliament once again. So my hope is this 2024 election, we can actually get some, how can I say it, some integrity back into our parliament across the board.
Okay. Is that wishful thinking?
No, I don't think it is wishful thinking. I think if you look at the parliamentary candidates across all parties, I think there's a new generation of thinking coming forward. I know certainly from the Conservative candidates that I've known since the 2019 election, we will certainly see some professionalism and courtesy brought back to Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Hina, please.
The problem has been that we have a system that allows MPs to get re-elected again and again and again. It doesn't matter what they do. They seem to have, they have safe seats in this political system. And the real problem is the need for us to change our political system. We want to get rid of the first past the post, have proportional representation. Therefore, political parties will really have to work incredibly hard to get your vote, and will have to stick to what they say. Their promises need to be met. And that's how we bring integrity and ethics back into politics and brings trust back into politics. Right now, our system is broken, and it's because we have, quite frankly, some very lazy politicians who keep on getting re-elected, and that needs to stop.
Hina, thank you very much.
Would that include Ed Davey?
Ed Davey's one of the hardest working people I know. Thank you very much.
Okay, Sharmen, please.
Aside when he's on roller coasters and bungee jumping and stuff like that.
It brings a smile to us all.
I think politicians' job is to affect change, not bring a smile. But one thing I do agree with you is on the political system. The political system absolutely needs to be reformed. It is not working, and it certainly doesn't work when you need a hell of a lot more people to vote in order to get a Green MP or a Liberal Democrat MP elected than you do a Conservative MP. But the one thing I'd have to say is that dishonesty and honesty generally in politics has been impacted by a group of individuals that have perhaps been on our front pages over the last few years. But I've worked in policy, and one of the things that I've noticed is there's actually 650 MPs in our parliament, and many of the MPs that aren't on the front pages are actually quietly just getting on with the job of doing policy work. And there are some people that are actually just seriously taking the job of being a constituency MP and enacting the wishes of their constituents. And one of those MPs that I would like to pay tribute to right now is Caroline Lucas, who will be leaving. She will be leaving. She's not standing, so she will be leaving politics. But she has been an absolute a credit to politics. And secondly, the other thing that I think really needs to be engaged when it comes to looking at making politics more representative and fit for the future is engaging young people. So one of the things that I do locally since I've become involved in policy and politics is trying to bring young people into the fold, regardless of whatever policy or politics they back, but trying to make them take ownership of this space. Because the reality is we've got a space of MPs that do not represent the age, the ethnicity of our country. They do not represent our country as a whole. We need to bring younger people into politics. And so we need to remove the apathy that younger people have been, unfortunately, subjected to. And that's by encouraging them. So, you know, whatever field we're in, whatever space of work that we're in, I think it's really important that younger people are encouraged to enter politics, regardless of what party background they're from.
Thank you very much. Lord Khan, finally, please, briefly, because we do have one question left.
I mean, 2019 to 2024 will be remembered as the most disastrous government in our history. We had Partygate, we had COVID contracts, you know, this is some kickbacks out of it. This is the most horrific behaviour by the government's conduct in these 5 years. And I think that the word I'm looking at is chaos. And that's why I'm proud to say Keir Starmer, whatever you say about him, he's the guy that's changed our party. He's changed our party, and now he wants to change the country. And that's why on Thursday, in 36 hours, people can go to the polls and look at whether we want economic stability, a build-out country, national renewal, and get rid of this horrific Tory government which has destroyed our reputation globally and destroyed our public services domestically.
Thank you, Lord Khan. Thank you very much. We have literally minutes left, so I have a final question, and it's directed initially at you, Atiq, the Conservatives. Could I please ask you to respond 30 seconds or less, each of you, so we can finish on time, please? And it's about Islamophobia. Given where we are and the people in the room, the topic is Islamophobia. And in my community, I can speak personally, people are rightly still talking about the fact that your party didn't adopt the APPG, British Muslims, definition on Islamophobia. And there was no investigation either that was promised by Boris Johnson. That didn't happen into the party's Islamophobia. Just your thoughts and comments on that.
Well, first of all, let me start with the definition of Islamophobia as proposed by the APPG. I was part of the Conservative Muslim Forum, and our chairman was Muhammad Amin, who's a very learned and educated man. And the problem that we foresaw with the definition was the word Muslimness and perceived Muslimness. I mean, you know, it's not clear enough what this means, and the difficulty.
It was made very clear, though, by the APPG.
I don't think
Muslimness
so.
could be somebody who wears a turban by an ignorant person is seen as Muslim.
Could be, but it could be something else as well. It was a very subjective wording, and anti-Muslim bigotry, anti-Muslim hatred would be a lot clearer, because it is quite clear what that means. The government is committed to bringing forward its own definition of Islamophobia, and if we're back in government, I shall look forward to working
with all due respect, I think you've had years to come back on that, and it hasn't happened. I'm sorry, we must move on. Hina, please.
It's an absolute disgrace, actually, that they haven't accepted the definition. The Liberal Democrats were the first party to accept the definition. Sikh communities were one of the communities that were impacted after September the 11th, with some horrific attacks, which is why we use the word Muslimness. And I am proud of the fact that we accept this definition. It helps communities when it comes to things like hate crime. I know that if something happened to me that, was, racist, and I call the police and explain what had happened to me, they will be able to classify that if I explain it in the way that, this recent attack happened to me recently, where a police officer actually said, that's Islamophobia. You feel heard, you feel listened, and you are recognised. And that is the importance of having a definition.
Okay, thank you very much. Very briefly, please, Sharmen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Islamophobia is an absolute stain on society. I've spent a lot of time over the last few months working in the policy space when it comes to Islamophobia, and I can tell you for certain that Islamophobia is not just a Conservative Party problem. It spans across the political spectrum, and no more clearer an example than the recent case of Faisal Shaheen, who was left off, who was essentially cast down as a candidate by the Labour Party simply for trying to articulate Islamophobia within her party. She actually said that herself. So actually, all parties have a responsibility to play in this, and the Conservative Party are not the only party that are responsible.
Thank you. 30 seconds, please, Lord Khan.
I don't need 30 seconds. I'll just say it in 10 seconds. No ifs, no buts. APPG definition should have been adopted by all parties, all institutions across the country. It's a shame that the Conservatives didn't do that.
Thank you, Lord Khan. Thank you very much. That, I'm afraid, is all the time we have. The hour, as I suspected, did fly by. It's been a fantastic event, spirited. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, audience in the room. Thank you at home for watching and for your important questions and the spirit in which you asked them. Thank you to our representatives as well. We know you're very, very busy on the campaign trail, and some of you have come here at short notice. We really appreciate your attendance and your contributions. Finally, thank you to the organisers and the team here at the Queen Elizabeth II Centre. We really appreciate your work in putting on tonight's event, particularly the Community Exchange Hub, of course. And if you'd like to follow the work of the Community Exchange Hub, round of applause, please, for them. If you'd like to follow them, please do go to the website communityexchangehub.co.uk to stay across all of their news and upcoming events. I wish you all a very good evening. Assalamu alaikum.
Don't get offended by the thing.
That was it.